now I'm live where I was not before. So thank you for being patient. Hope you're still out there. So you already know who I am. I won't go through the introductions right now, but it's good to see you out there. So, yes, welcome to episode 9 of Intercultural Insiders. And again, as you might know, my name's John McGraw, and I help expats and newcomers feel confident in their new country in less time and pain. I am the founder of Yaku Coaching, which is dedicated to helping you create your pathway to success in a new culture. So this has it's been an interesting couple of weeks, I would say, with the World Cup, and particularly interesting in my family. So those of you who have watched earlier episodes will know about my wife, Liliana, who is from Argentina. However, you may not know that my brother's wife has roots in Croatia. So that certainly made for a very interesting dynamic when the game was on yesterday. So needless to say, with the results, our household was happier than my brother's yesterday. And it's got me thinking, because I have to say that thanks to the migration and globalization, our own worlds are more diverse than they would have been decades ago. Just the fact that we have that international relations in a family in Canada with Argentina and Canada, that's really remarkable. And I've been asked in the past who I support in the World Cup. And I have to say that I admit that I'm not a big soccer, or depending where you're from, football fan, but I have reflected on this in the past, and it's not necessarily an easy question because there are really multiple countries that come to mind when I think about this. And for me, it comes down to Canada, Argentina, Ireland, Nigeria, and Japan, and in no particular order. There are, of course, reasons for each. Canada, of course, because I was born here in Canada, and it's where my father was born and raised as well. Argentina, of course, because of my wife, as already mentioned. Ireland, because that's where my mother is from, and I have dual citizenship in Canada and Ireland because of that. Nigeria, because that is where my parents met many years ago. And while I wasn't born in Nigeria myself, many of their former students came to visit with us and in some cases stay with us from as early as I can remember. And of course, Japan, because I lived and worked there for several years, and it was a major turning point in my life, both professionally and also personally, because of course, that's where I met Liliana. So it's these different countries, they represent a tapestry of experiences. And I'm sure we all have these tapestries of experiences. Now, some of us may have only lived in one country, but depending where we are, we have the opportunity to interact with other national cultures. And it's an important thing to stress that cultures are not only national. There are other cultures which sometimes have just as much, if not more, influence on who we are and who we become. In my case, we can talk about a number of aspects. My professional side, I'm a business coach and intercultural trainer. I have background as an ESL instructor from 15 years of doing that both in Japan and Canada. I have background as an actor, which I pursued in my younger days in Canada. Also, generational culture. I'm of Generation X. I live in a city. I've primarily lived in cities most of my life. Also, even with subcultures and hobbies, I like exercising. I like to work out. And as some of you who've followed me on LinkedIn and seen some of my posts, I like watching pro wrestling. And I'm more confident about mentioning that now than I would have perhaps when I was younger. The point is that all of these aspects have their own cultures and they make up who I am. And we should consider these aspects when we think about culture, not just the national side. And when we're adapting to different cultures, we want to take those other cultures into account as well, those professional cultures. When you are moving into another corporation, for example, or communicating, for example, marketing people talking with data engineers, or they all have their own cultures, they have their own insider language, and the thought processes can be different as well. And these are all other aspects of culture to adapt to, not just national cultures. So, before we also get into today's interview with Jesus, which we'll talk about a little bit more of soon, I have another announcement to make. Now, as you know, this is the last episode of 2022, and we will be going on hiatus for a few weeks until January 11th. However, if you want to get more intercultural insiders and get more of those stories and so on, I have an exciting announcement. We're going to be becoming an audio podcast as well, starting on Monday, December 19th. So all of the episodes that have been broadcast on LinkedIn Live and through YouTube are going to be re-released as audio podcasts on all the major platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and many others. And all of these, they'll be re-released. So for those of you who perhaps don't have the time to watch the videos, you'll have time to listen to the audio. And of course, you can do other things like driving to your family's place for the holidays or cleaning your house or exercising. So you'll get all of that content and you can listen to it at your own leisure on your favorite audio podcast platform. And that's going to be released starting on Monday the 19th and going to be released on a schedule of 3 episodes a week until we're all caught up. And then future episodes will be released shortly after the live stream version goes live, so that you will have the live stream episodes going on YouTube and LinkedIn Live, and then the audio podcasts released a few days later. So, very excited to announce that. But, of course, we have, if you want to find out more about the podcast, I should also mention, of course, there will be more announcements on LinkedIn and YouTube, also on the Twitter and Instagrams for Hyaku Coaching. And all of those links can be found on the Hyaku Coaching website at thriveglobally.ca. So let's get on to the interview, part 2 of the interview with Jesus Romero Palacio, who is a project manager for a nonprofit organization, a professor, I should say, a coach, and also a newcomer to Canada. And this is part 2 of the part 2 interview, part 1, which was, of course, last week. And again, it's a very inspiring interview, I feel, for someone who has just recently come to Canada and details all of the experiences that he's had with that. Some of the highlights I want to mention, he talks about being an introvert while networking and what the strengths of that are, the connection between language and identity, and the importance of having a greater purpose when pursuing goals. And I can see that it's quite active in the chat right now. Jesus will be attending in the chat. So feel free to comment throughout the episode, throughout the interview, and Jesus will be happy to answer. And I will, of course, comment and answer questions as well as they come up. So we want to make this, as always, a very lively, interactive experience. And of course, after the interview, there will be some time to comment on questions. There will be some further announcements about Hyaku Coaching and the Intercultural Insiders show. So make sure to stick around after the interview. So, without further wait, let's get into part 2 of the interview with Jesus Romero Palacio. Earlier, you mentioned that you are an introvert. And it's interesting because my wife Liliana, who I had earlier on the program, mentioned that she was an introvert. I also consider myself an introvert, and yet we also know the importance of networking in Canada. So, what can you say about that, and what are some of the strengths you might have as an introvert?
For me, my interpretation about being introvert is we are more selective. So when I arrive here, I study the environment of networking for newcomers. I participate in different newcomers initiatives like Hispanotech, the PMI Toronto Chapter 2. I think the principal aspect about being introvert is about being more selective. And I think this is not a disadvantage. I think it could be an advantage. I'm a selective person with my relationship. I think it's more about how you build your relationships. It's a challenge for me, but I'm working on that. And I think it's okay. It's not about who is introvert or extrovert or whatever. It's about what is your desired result, what aspect of being introvert help you or support you to get this desired result. So what tools in this current state help you with your desired result? And sometimes it's not about being an introvert, it's about what do I want? Always know what I want. If I know what I want, there is no problem. Maybe I need to do some sacrifice or something like that, but it's to get this desired result. So this is my point of view.
I see what you're saying about the importance of knowing what it is that you want when you are networking. You also mentioned another thing that really resonated with me, which is being true to yourself, being true to who you are. And I think that applies not only to networking, but to everything, including adapting to a new culture. Sometimes I think that newcomers to a new culture, sometimes there's a belief that you have to change who you are and how you present yourself to be more like someone from the country. What do you think about that?
When I come here, it's okay. You need to change your curriculum because here your curriculum is not working. The way that you present it in your country is not the same here. My name, for example, in Spanish is Jesus, but here is Jesus. And oh, you are Jesus. So when you present it here, I think as this is a country of immigrants, there is an essential part of you that don't need to change. One thing is adapt yourself to a new culture. Another thing is change yourself. These two things for me have been a challenge because in my journey when I arrive here, sometimes I could be very hard with me in a disciplined way. I ask to myself a lot of things and judge me a lot hard because the language. And I think the language is a huge part of us because I speak myself in Spanish, not in English. So when I arrive here, if I need to understand the culture, I need to speak myself in English or in Spanish because I need to learn to think in English. But because of me, it's different because I know about English, but one thing is read in English, another thing is live in environment only in English. Because of that, it was hard, and currently it's hard for me. I remember some interviews when I know that I was a perfect fit, but I didn't know how to express myself. If this interview was in Spanish, other thing could be happen, but my reality is in English. So I think one of the most challenging part is this conflict about identity related for me in language. I express my feels in Spanish to myself, and here in my home we speak in Spanish. So in what moments I must speak in English, what moments I must speak in Spanish. a journey that I have now is I need to learn English, but other mainly aspect is about the age because I moved here when I was almost 40. It's a little challenge to change some behaviors. And because of that, I think all of us have the opportunity to adapt ourselves to improve. It's not about the age, it's about your attitude. This aspect about how can I be myself here as in my country, and it's not about the language, it's about maybe know who you are. If we can't express in words who we are, we can express in terms of sharing our life with others. So our identity, if we move to Canada, to Australia, to whatever, we are the same the human being with a challenge, with different opportunities to learn, to grow, to be better than before. But we are the same. At first generations, it's not about okay, now I'm a Canadian. No, I'm a Colombian guy. I'm living in Canada. When I have my permanent residence, I will be Colombian guy with a permanent residence here in Canada because I born in Colombia and I live there more than 30 years, more than 90% of my life. So as first generation is a challenge. For me, the main challenge is try to understand the culture, yes, but try to understand the language because for me, the communication is my main challenge, my passion. I can't be the same human being who is speaking other language, but this is not change my nature.
There's still that importance of who you are at the core, right? And what that makes you. And again, I want to acknowledge how you are approaching these challenges of adapting to a new culture and seeing what opportunities there are and your persistence. Some of the earlier job interviews you had where you had a difficult time expressing yourself, and yet you have continued, and now you are in this position as a project manager for a nonprofit organization. So you have had a lot of successes, and that's something special. What would you like to say to listeners who might be having similar struggles to you, or maybe have just arrived or are going to arrive in Canada?
My first thing is about being conscious that here is a country for immigrants of immigrants. There are a lot of free resources that could help you to adapt easily. But more than the results of external resources is about the inner resources. It's about who you are. It's not about, oh, I need more money or I need a good job. It's about the purpose. And I'm doing these things because I believe I can create a better reality for the future generations. Because I think when you believe in something else than the short terms, you can achieve better results in your life. What is the purpose behind your actions? So every sacrifice you did today could help you or guide you to be happy at the end. When you are an immigrant, there are a lot of sacrifice that you need to do, but it's not about the sacrifice. It's about the legacy you give others. Like me, maybe the person who see this video, okay, I don't speak English well and I don't want to express myself. I'm expressing myself here in a imperfect way, but I doing this now because I realize the only way to do is jump. Just do it. Just do it. Do it with value. Do it with your family. Do it with love to you, with love to your family too. So it's a pleasure, John, and thank you so much for inviting me to share my story with others. And yes, it's great to know exist people like you to help others. It's a good path to you.
Thank you for sharing your story and having the courage to come here and tell us about all of that. I think that there are many people watching or listening who will benefit from what you've shared today. So thank you very much. Yeah, I don't know what else to say except just inspiring. You know, when Jesus approached me and agreed to do the interview, and even when he was not feeling so confident about his English abilities, went ahead and he did that. And I think that it applies to adapting to not just another culture, but to any aspects in life. Sometimes it's easy to stay in our comfort zones, even when the circumstances aren't so good, because it's just something that we feel that we know we're comfortable with it because we know it, which is exactly the definition of a comfort zone. And perhaps there's some story we're telling ourselves that we don't deserve better. And I think it really comes down to really thinking about that and questioning that thought. What is it that we don't deserve? Where does that come from? And it's worth really taking the time to think deeply about that. And I think that that's one thing as a coach that I've been able to do and learn about that inner exploration that's really helps, and it connects with culture and everything else. Yeah, and I'm just going to give a moment to highlight some of the other comments that have come up as well. Yes, so Paul joining us from Vancouver as well. Jesus is courageous. Everyone's afraid, but the courageous do the thing anyway. Exactly. Exactly. It's not about not feeling the fear. It's about knowing the fear is there, experiencing it, and continuing anyways. I don't think that I'm not sure that Jesus is actually with us in the chat today, but I know that he's got a lot of, I'm sure he appreciates all of the comments and all of the questions that are coming up. Questions about the biggest challenge. Perhaps if there's an opportunity in the future, it would be great to take these questions and get the answers from Jesus in a future episode. I'm not sure if he'll be able to join us for today, but it was wonderful to have that interview on the episode and for him to share everything with us. And it's, again, really remarkable. And yes, and I agree, Liliana. Yes, thank you, Jesus, for putting yourself out there and sharing your experience. Thank you for sharing that with us. I like I said at the end of the recorded interview, I think it's very inspiring, and it's going to be inspiring. It's inspiring for those of us who are here live, and it's going to be inspiring for those who are watching later, and of course for those who will be listening when it's released as a podcast. So, a few other things that were very inspiring to me. This being the last episode of the year, there are so many people. I don't have much time, but there's so many people I'd want to thank for the changes that have gone over the past year. Some people who are in the chat right now, I can think of Paul Duke, of course, and Anastasia for introducing me and kind of bringing me into the world of podcasting and doing live streaming. And that's, through that experience that I did with them on another show, that's really opened up my world, and I want to be thankful for that. And all of the other people who have helped me and inspired me along the way. My wife, of course, Liliana, who those of you who've watched earlier episodes have met, for always supporting me, and the clients that I've met, other people. There are so many, and I think that it's really important to remember that there is a saying that we can go faster on our own, but we can go farther together. And when you have a clear vision of what it is that you want, and sometimes that doesn't come right away. Sometimes that takes some time to experiment and learn. Life is a learning journey. But if we can work together and you find like-minded people, there's so much you can do. So just wanted to say that. And thank you everyone who's able to join today. Um, couple of other quick things. Of course, I have mentioned the Newcomers Success Program, which will give more information about that later on in the year, and some more thoughts about the direction of Hyaku coaching and working more with businesses in helping to facilitate businesses. And one of my clients and great supporters, Tomoko Sato, of president and director of KSD North America, uh, has been a great supporter of mine, and I've loved working with her. And in fact, she gave a quick recommendation for me that I on LinkedIn. She mentions how I won't read out the whole thing for you. Of course, you can find it, but she was essentially able to, because of working together, we're able to find ways to where she was finding struggles of working with American and Canadian suppliers to help her company that was based in Japan to develop their business here. She has come to realize how her own culture has influenced her thinking, and she's found more effective ways to communicate. And she even recently had a meeting that she facilitated between a Japanese manufacturer and an American supplier, and she was able to help save a relationship that had some promise but looked like it was going to possibly not go forward because of failed communication. And she was able to help that, and thanks to that, she's told me that her business is moving forward faster because of the work that we've done together. And I'm very thankful for all the support that she's given me and the fact that she's trusted me to help her with that and her business. And I'm very excited. And of course, well, now that we've shared that, I, of course, want to mention the episode, the first new episode of the new year that's coming up, which is with, of course, Shahzad Gidwani, who is a sales and marketing multicultural team leader. He has decades of experience working in multiple cultures, working with multiple cultures in an international setting. He's also an executive on the board for Brilliant Minds Group, BMG, which is helping newcomers and international students adapt to their lives in Canada. So I'm very excited to have him come on as the first new episode of 2022. And again, we will be on hiatus, but keep in mind that the podcast is going to start releasing as of Monday, so you can keep your fix while you're exercising, traveling for the holidays, or what have you. So it's been a great pleasure to launch the program in 2022. Looking forward to progressing in 2023. Thank you very much for all of your watching, everyone out there, you're listening and watching and supporting, and very excited about what's going to happen in the coming year. So until then, keep navigating your way to success between cultures towards your goals. Thank you. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. Take care.